Hello and welcome to the Divorce Advocate, where we help dads create a healthy and less traumatic divorce. I'm your host, Jude Sandoval, and I am very excited today to have our guest who we're going to be talking about, and you hear me talking about it often, but this guy's got a phenomenal, awesome story to share with us about resiliency and really recreating your self-image. But before I introduce him, I just want to remind you the divorce quiz is still up at the website at thedivorceadvocate.com. Click on the divorce quiz tab, or you can go to it directly at thedivorcequiz.com. Again, this is just a awesome tool for you to help gauge where you're at in the divorce process compared to others who are either going through it or have gone through it. And if you take about 10 minutes, go through all the questions, it's just going to give you a real a good idea right off the bat. And if you want to spend some time interpreting those results, you've got a free opportunity to do that with me. So take advantage of it. It's at thedivorcequiz.com. All right, my guest today is a Stanford MBA and a former Apple executive who held the position of worldwide director of finance. Now, he had truly achieved, like at Apple, wow, a level of success that many would envy. He had everything he thought he wanted, the dream job at Apple, a home, a family, graduated from a top college, Stanford, which is awesome in the world. And he expected that this path would fulfill him, but ironically, he felt like a failure. Now, he was constantly dreaming about retirement or fantasizing about becoming a mailman. He had checked all the boxes, but felt locked in the trap of being a success. And for years, he struggled to escape the trap of success. Like so many A players, he created meaning from pursuit and progress, but he had already accomplished everything he thought he would, and it still wasn't enough. Staying at Apple until retirement felt like selling his life for a paycheck. He knew that he wanted work to have meaning and purpose, but it took years to find the path to happiness by becoming a coach. Now he shares this process with others. Welcome to the show, Rusty Gaillard.
Thanks, Jude. Super happy to be here.
Rusty, I said that wrong. Rusty Gaillard.
Yes, Gaillard.
All right, yep. Got it.
You got it.
Got it. Welcome, my friend. Tell us a little bit about, this is just such an awesome story. Tell us a little bit about yourself. So that was just a brief synopsis, but fill us in.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. And thank you for the introduction. And thank you for having me here. I grew up in a very kind of traditional household. My dad worked, my mom stayed at home, and my dad was actually very successful. Went to work every day in a suit, literally put on a suit and went to the office every day. And he was around, right? He was part of our lives, and he was home for dinner every day and all of that. And a lot of his energy was pointed towards work. And I grew up in a family, and the way I grew up is I wanted more engagement from him. And so, that's something I carried forward into my life as an adult, but I also carried forward that model of putting on the suit and going to work every day. And so that was the path I followed. You described, I worked for some big companies. I worked at General Electric out of college, went for the MBA at Stanford, worked at Apple, was very successful there. And that was just my expectation of what my life would look like. And so I was checking all the boxes, doing everything I was supposed to do. What was not included in that introduction is getting divorced. This was about 6 years ago now. And that really kind of was one of the biggest failures in my life at that point. And that's how I saw it at that point. I saw it as a failure. And that was hard, right? Someone who had up until that point been very successful, which I had, to have to confront what felt like a failure and not one I could hide or brush away. It was very public and everybody could see it. Right. That was a real challenge for me. And I would say that was in many ways a turning point, which led me down to this path of becoming a coach. And I've been remarried since, and my life is really wonderful now, but I wouldn't have seen that or predicted it at that time because I was just in the midst of it.
Right. Well, and that's a great point, because a lot of the guys listening are right in the middle of all of the chaos that goes with divorce. And now you said it's been 6 years. For me, it's been 9.5 years. We have a little bit of time to see how some of what those challenges have assisted us in learning to utilize going forward. Share a little bit about that, because offline you're talking about that really being one of the first wake up calls, your quote unquote failure. And I wouldn't even call it a failure, right? It's just feedback. If you want to use a business term, there's no failure, there's just feedback, right? How did that, what did you learn from that, and how did you utilize that going forward in the rest of your life?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I first, I'll just give you a little bit of the sequence of events.
Okay.
My wife at the time said she no longer wanted to be married. It's like, okay. So we're getting divorced. That was pretty clear. We had been to couples therapy. I had been to individual therapy. We had done all sorts of work. Kind of came to the end of that, and it was her decision. But she never filed for divorce. And so, this went on for a while, but it was clear nothing was changing. So finally I said, okay, I'll file for divorce. Like, let's just do the paperwork and get done with it. And the next filing came back, and it was like blistering. It was accusing me of inappropriate behavior with my son, all sorts of stuff over the top. I was like, whoa, where did this come from? And that was the beginning of multiple years going through the whole court process. Anyway, it was very contentious and ugly. It was really ugly. And so for me, it was hard not to see that as, just there's on the surface level, the fact that I'm getting divorced, right? There was that. But then there was the this person that I had been married to for 12 years. And unraveling in this way, and just getting so nasty. And it's like, what's wrong? Just these questions of what's wrong with me? Did I really do this? And, I would think the other thing that for me was a real personal part of this journey was through all the therapy and the couples therapy and all of this, somehow I had come to this belief that I was the one who screwed it all up. That I was the one who damaged the relationship and made it so it wouldn't work. And having to live through that and tolerate that. And it was very uncomfortable. And so it was, there were plenty of times where divorce, my son was with me some of the time, but I'm alone other times. I'm living by myself. Yeah. And I'm literally sitting in my apartment at night, and I'm like, what am I doing? It was very uncomfortable, but being willing to tolerate that and go through it and be sad and question and cry and all the other things that just I didn't want to do, but was part of the journey that was in front of me. And I'm the kind of person who I will do what is necessary to move forward. And that seemed to be what was necessary to move forward. And it enabled me to get through that time.
Right. So you taught, and so you talk in your book, Breaking the Code, and it's called Breaking the Code, Stop Looking for Answers and Start Enjoying Life, which I love. And you talk about creating the self-image that you want going forward. And I feel like, and what you just described at the end there, and was true for me during this, and I hear from a lot of divorcing dads, that it's such a chaotic time, and you're questioning yourself. You don't know you don't know what the future is like. There's fear, but in the midst of all that, what were you able to do then to move forward, maybe get past some of that discomfort that you were talking about, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? Having discomfort, it's maybe like a red flag, wake up sign to pay attention to something. What were you able to do to move forward?
Well, there's a couple of things. One is, for me, when I was in the midst of that, for me, it was just getting through it, to be honest. There was some element of, as I mentioned, it was highly contentious in court and decisions making about, what am I going to do and not do? And that consumed a ton of my energy, and it was just getting through that in the best way possible. One of the things that I did that was a huge support for me is, I mentioned I had been in therapy and all of that, but my family growing up, I described it as pretty traditional. Part of that traditional aspect was we didn't talk about the challenges in our lives and our feelings or anything like that.
Yeah.
So I had never had a conversation. And, you know, even today I talked to my mom, she's like, of course we don't talk about that thing. You just pick up and keep going.
Right.
But being honest about it and being able to deal with this sucks and the pain of it and all of that, like that was an important learning for me. And so I met some people and I ended up forming a men's group, and we met every week for 6 years. And that was a huge element of my strength and ability to navigate through this time. Having other men, not all of whom were divorced, some were, not everybody was, but everyone was going through their own challenge of some kind or another. But be able to do that in a community of people and have a group where I can talk to people and, you know, get feedback and share what's going on in my life and hear their perspective and get their support was really huge for me. And that enabled me when I started to come out the other side of this process to start thinking about, oh, first of all, I just survived something really hard. And if I can survive something that hard, like I can do anything, right? So that was really empowering. But then the second part was, what do I really want to do? Now that I've come out through this time, I've come out of the storm, if you will, and the sky is starting to turn blue and the sun is coming out. And I was like, gosh, what's next? And I just had this sense of creativity and possibility and just potential in life, and was excited to move in that direction.
Well, so some of the listeners might think, oh, Jude's paying this guy, because one of the things that I always emphasize is not isolating and getting yourself surrounded with other people, and whether that's a community of other men, like you started a group, or going to maybe a step group or a church group or something, surrounding yourself with people. Because I know, and maybe this was your experience too, like the first time I sat down and I just went to a group meeting, I just listened. I didn't even say a word. What everything that was said in that meeting, I was thinking to myself, are they reading my mind? She's like, other people are going through this. Other people are having these same thoughts in my mind. I'm not crazy. Like, I'm not the one. You said, like, you know, I started to think, was I the one that caused this? And I got the same thoughts, like it's all my fault, and I did this, or I could have done that. And then I started listening. I'm like, oh man, so other people are having this. It is so comforting. And I think it took several meetings for me to start to share, but then having that community around you. So I appreciate that you share that. And I just want to emphasize with the guys listening, reach out, because there's other of us, and it doesn't, you know, we don't know who it is. We just don't know. Could be the Apple executive, right? That's the worldwide director of finance, going through the same thing that, you know, just me, the guy in Denver that is the same thing. You know, we're having the same experiences. So reach out and connect. That's such a huge thing. I love that. And then, you know, the support.
Hey, Jude, can I add something on that?
Yeah, please.
I think, you know, the stereotypical man doesn't even want to ask directions when you're lost, right? So the idea of asking for help there's a big barrier in that, I think, for a lot of men. And one of the things that I learned in this journey is, and you know, I went to 12-step programs. I went to multiple 12-step programs. Mm-hmm. I was willing to try just about anything because I was in a lot of pain.
Right.
But one of the things I found is that whenever I was willing to put myself out there, when I was willing to take a risk, whether it's to show up at a meeting and just listen, or to speak at a meeting for the first time, or to share something about my inner thoughts with somebody else, almost any one of those steps, I was scared. I didn't want to do it. And I was like, there's a part of me that's resisting, but finding the willingness to go forward because I know it's going to help me and do it, even though there's a huge part of me that doesn't want to do it. I'm like, I'm afraid. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't like this. But knowing that it's the right thing and being willing to take action anyway, that was huge for me in this process. Yeah, no, I love that. And it's so incredibly powerful what happens with men when you start to do that. And in some of our groups, it'll be one man that'll say, and you alluded to it right away, which I love, which was, hey, I was just in bed crying last night. You know, and then you just almost hear a sigh of, oh,
Him too? No kidding, really? Wow, I'm not the only one doing that. And yes, yeah, us men, we cry. We have these fears. We have this pain that's inside of us that we're worried about. And so getting together and talking about that, and look, it's not, women are able to emote much easily and faster than men are. Doesn't mean, and it doesn't, and that's okay. That doesn't mean that it's better or worse. We do it in different ways, and it doesn't mean that even in all of our meetings we're just going to sit there and share what we're crying about all night. But just saying that I was upset or whatever, or whatever other feelings I was having, is something that just opens us up to then just being comfortable with moving forward in that process, in whatever that process was. And I love that you said, just I just had to get through it. So part of this is just finding ways to get through it every day, figuring out ways to get through what if it's the sadness around not seeing your son. You mentioned that that was a big one for me, not having my daughters half time. I never dreamed of being a dad I'm not half the time, like I'm always thinking about them, but not having them around all of the time, that was a really, really big, difficult one. So I appreciate that in you saying, well, you got to figure out a strategy just to get through it, get through those emotions. It might be emotions, get through that fear, whatever it might be. And then I think you said the next step is then creating what you want. And so talk us through a little bit around doing that once, and that could be simultaneous, right? That you could be just trying to get through some of these challenging days or things that are going on, but you really need to have some vision and direction.
Yeah. I would say for me, as I was getting through the hardest times, the pull for me was to do it well. Because you hear these stories of people, men and women, who get divorced multiple times because they keep marrying another version of the same person.
Yeah.
And I was just determined, like, I'm not going to do that. I want to, so getting through it for me is not just about suffering and ignoring and, watching movies and eating Doritos or whatever it is to kind of comfort yourself and not have to deal with it. I'm like, no, I'm going to deal with it because I don't want to do this again.
Yeah.
So that was the getting through it part. But then as I started to come out of that and life started to get a little bit easier, I'd been in a lot of therapy. I'd come from this place in my marriage thinking that the failure was, a lot of it was my fault. And therapy tends to be looking at the problems and where do they come from and looking back in your history and all that and trying to understand it. So it was very kind of like problem oriented. And so I was like, enough of the problems. Like, enough. I don't want to think about problems anymore. And I was fortunate at this point in my life that I started to discover other people and get connected with other people who were forward looking. And it was my first encounter with a coach. And a coach is not about problems. A coach is about objectives and goals and possibilities. And just that orientation, for me, shifting from backward looking, problem oriented to forward looking and goal oriented was just, it's so exciting to me. It's like, oh man, there's so much that I can do. And that was really for me, the kind of the turning point for my life. And it coincided with the end of the divorce.
Yeah, no, people are going to think I paid you to say that too, right? Because I always talk about the differences in therapy and coaching, and neither one of them is better or worse. But if you can do them in conjunction, or starting with therapy or then doing coaching, it will help you immensely. Because what you alluded to, part of it is you want to understand what you may have brought from childhood, which you described with your family. And I thought that was another great point. And no matter what your childhood is like, you bring things into your adult life that then you take into your relationships. And so you can have a great life like you described, or you can have a very difficult, challenging, traumatic childhood like many listeners have, or that you hear about, but it's understanding what that was. So that's where the therapy is really, really great and important. If you can afford it and do that, get involved with it. But then, being stuck with that, and that's the part of the issue that I have with therapy, is oftentimes you can be in it forever and ever and ever. And that's, a good therapist is not going to keep you in for forever and ever. But to move forward then and then create, that's where the coaching comes in.
Yeah.
And that's, if you've had a coach as as a kid, they're always like helping you to figure out how you're going to improve yourself in the team.
Mhm.
So that's a really great point. Tell me then, and maybe you can give a little more specific and maybe something like a teaser out of the book about creating or changing after divorce. Well, you talk about that in the context of your change in your career,
Yeah.
how you started to change that self-image to where then you were looking at that vision direction and then moving forward towards it.
Yeah. Well, so I'd say that the self-image piece, a lot of that was forged in the crucible of divorce, honestly. It was if I can survive this, if I can get through this, and get through it in what I consider to be a good way, like a healthy way. I feel good about the way I handled myself during the divorce, during some very challenging situations. Like, I feel good about all that. And that for me was finding this place of like, I can do things well. And even in the midst of really challenging times, I can be solid and I can make good decisions and I can feel good about myself. That was a huge part of how I saw myself. Then I brought some of that into this career dimension of my life. So you were alluding to, I was working at Apple. Apple's a great company. So many people would love to have that job, and it was stable and safe and a good paycheck, and like there was a lot of good things about it. And I actually liked the work that I was doing there.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to do it for the rest of my life. And so I literally remember one day writing out my resume. I updated my resume and looking at it and saying, who would hire me? What kind of job can I get? But the problem with that question is it led to more of the same kinds of jobs, which I didn't want. But I didn't know a way out of that. It just felt like this trap. Well, this is the experience I have. This is what I'm qualified to do, but I don't want any of the jobs that I'm qualified to do. And I felt very stuck in that. And the way that shifted for me was literally inside of 20-minute conversation, which was a tool that I learned and now I use with my clients, which is to you can almost call it playing the what if game. And this person said, well, what if your past experience, your resume, didn't have to dictate what you're doing in the future? What if you could get paid to do things that you really like to do? What if it didn't matter what other people thought? Your family, your ex-wife, your coworkers, what if you didn't have to worry about what they thought about what you were doing? What if you could have the kind of work that was fulfilling and meaningful to you? And just, enough of these what if kind of questions helped me realize all the ways I had limited what I thought was possible. Because I grew up in a family where my dad put on a suit and went to his corporate job every day. That's what I did for most of my life. As you talked about, we learn things from our family. And it's the origin of the title of my book, Breaking the Code. It's almost like we've been programmed. We've been coded to believe certain things, to work in a certain way, to believe relationships are going to look a certain way. Right. So part of getting out of that is breaking the code, which is the what if game. Well, what if those things didn't constrain me? What if I could do whatever I wanted to do? What if I could get paid for that? What if I could love my work? What if I could work part-time and still be financially successful? Like, that blows a lot of people's minds.
Right.
But if you start imagining those things, you can see possibilities that were invisible to you before. And that's what opened up for me this path of becoming a coach.
So I love that, asking yourself what if, and I love the fact that you say that in the context of, well, it was really being forged in the fire of my divorce, getting through that, seeing that I was strong enough to get through. And it is challenging, no matter what your divorce is like. It is challenging on so many levels that, and people, people say that this is one of the top 3 most stressful and challenging things that they go through in life. That I got through that, and by getting through that and proving to myself that I could, and then get on my life, that this, like, making a career change, which would be another one of those top things, was like, I can do that. And that's a beautiful message, I feel, for those listening, is that, now 6 years, me 9.5 years, others, that you can see the positives behind getting through and modeling. And I want to talk about this too, because you said you had a son, modeling that you're able to get through this difficult and challenging time. And that is not only beneficial for yourself, but for your children. And so talk a little bit about that. And I don't know how old your son was when you had the divorce and now, but for dads, especially, modeling something like that is absolutely huge.
Yeah. Yeah. So my son's 14 now. He was 6 when the whole process started, and the process was multiple years long.
Mm-hmm.
It's modeling that for him. I'm just so, I don't know, I feel good about that.
You should.
Don't know how else to say it.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Just, and what you were saying earlier is, everybody avoids pain. Of course, everyone avoids pain. Nobody likes to experience pain. And change has pain associated with it. Yeah. Whether it's change you want or change you don't want, right? The divorce was change I didn't want, and it was painful, right? But it taught me that I can tolerate pain and I'm okay, and I can get through that. So that enabled me to tolerate some pain for something that I did want, which was to go for this new job, create a new career for myself as a coach, and to model that and even in a small way on a daily basis, the discomfort. I mean, it's like having a conversation like this, right? I mean, Jude, we're talking pretty openly about our past experiences and how we felt about that and all of that, right? It's just like, okay, there's a little discomfort about who's going to listen to this? What are they going to think about what I'm saying, right? And so even in this conversation, there's some degree of pain, but am I willing to do it because it's helping other people, because it's moving me forward, it's making me a stronger and better person? Yeah, I'm willing to do all of that. And I think the modeling of that in all levels, right? Big levels, leaving a job, but small levels, having a conversation like this, I think there's so much value in that for our children.
Yeah. And so, Rusty, that's just awesome to hear that and hear how much it's impacted your son, because if the divorce never happened, there would never be this opportunity to model this for him. And I know, and this was so hard. For me with my daughters, it was the biggest thing, not having the family that I thought and that I believed, but now 9.5 years, I see all of the positive lessons that have come out of it, that there would have been no other way for you with my son, me with my daughters, to show them this. And then now you're showing him that you can make a career change and then do what you want to do and love it and still get paid for it and change that and then have a different environment. I mean, there's so many positives that come from that. It's so amazing to hear that story. And I just want to emphasize that. And I mean, it makes me so excited, so happy, and so proud of you. And because I'm proud of the dads that do this and then take an opportunity, because it is so challenging, like we said, and you've been through it, I've been through it, and all of you guys, and then take it, model it, and then this just absolutely has a ripple effect across the world. And I want the men listening to know that your son, my daughters, and their children, that if you can do this in a healthy and less traumatic way, that it will have a significant impact.
Yeah, just 2 things come to mind, Jude, as you're talking about that. Number one is back to this, tolerance of pain. I think men, we're way more comfortable tolerating physical pain than emotional pain.
Yes.
It's like, put me out there, put me on a brutal long hike, or, whatever. It's like physical punishment, bring it on. Right. But the emotional pain, oh no, I want nothing to do with that.
Right.
And, there's it's in building that strength to know that you can get through the emotional pain too, whether that's crying in your bed at night or whatever it is, right? Taking a risk to show up at a meeting, to get support, to talk about what's going on with you, those kinds of things. That is, man, in my life, that has served me so well.
Yeah.
So I wanted to at least make that point about, we've got the ability to tolerate pain. So it's, applying it in a new way.
Right. And I like that. I always use, especially with men, the physical fitness analogies, because exactly what you said, we're physical. We like to do the physical stuff. And it's no different than the first time maybe you got into the gym,
right?
Or learn to exercise or do a new sport. It's very uncomfortable, weird. You don't know quite about what it's going to be like, if you're going to like it, if you're likely to just suck at it, like to start, which is okay. But then once you start, and then it hurts, right?
Mhm.
Whether you're learning a new sport and you're falling down, or you're starting to weight lift and you're sore and it's just really painful.
Or it's
Same thing.
embarrassing.
Or yeah, yeah, exactly. Same thing. That's the same things with the feelings and the emotions. And but after you're still, you're just basically building that mental emotional muscle
Mhm.
that you would be doing physically. Same exact process. So I love
Yeah.
that analogy. I love that.
The other thing I was thinking about when you were talking about kids and modeling and all of that, one of the things I've come to value is when I was ready to start dating again, I went online and I signed up for the match.com, and I was like, I got married before online dating existed. So
Yes,
this was like a whole new world for me. And it was nuts. And it was really crazy and kind of comical. And anyway, I ended up meeting
That's
someone.
a whole nother show.
It is a whole nother show. But
yeah.
the person that I met, one of the first person I met, actually, we started dating and it just went really well. And we ended up getting married.
Awesome.
And so I'm married again. And one of the things I so value about her and our relationship is modeling a healthy relationship for my son.
Yes.
Right. And that includes the ability to have a disagreement, but recover from it. It includes the ability to like be kind and loving towards each other and support each other. And just like the kind of family environment that I always wanted, that I never quite figured out how to do in my first marriage. And having the opportunity to do that again and do it well, to me, is a real blessing. And I also feel really good about offering that to my son, that he gets to see a positive relationship.
Yeah, no, that's very, very huge. And maybe we'll come back and I'll have you back on the show. We can talk about that process of what you went through and developing a healthy relationship, maybe looking at what was positive about meeting your now wife and how you did things differently than the first time, because I think that's valuable information for the listeners in that process, right? That process of understanding what you brought to the relationship, what those dynamics were, because it sounds like you did it right. And you're obviously a much smarter guy than I am, because like I just, what you said earlier, just started dating exactly the same women and doing the same things, beating my head against the wall going, what's wrong, until I found the common denominator, which was me, right? So so maybe having a really smart person on the show to talk about this would be really helpful. So maybe we'll talk about that in the future. But I did want to touch a little bit on your book and have you tell us a little bit about the book, reason why you wrote it, and why one of the listeners should go pick it up.
Yeah. Well, so I wrote it because I experienced this, and I see so many people experience this. We operate life, as we were talking about, as if we're programmed, right? And that starts all the way from our childhood, but it continues all the way up through our life, through our relationships, our experience of a marriage and our experience of divorce, what we see the people around us doing. All of that drives what we think we are capable of. And that's our programming or our code. And if you can break through that code, I fundamentally believe everyone listening here today, if you're listening, you've got way more capability than you give yourself credit for.
Yes.
Right. It's like when you have a clear picture of what is it that you want, what matters to you, what is a good life, what is a good relationship, what is a good career. When you start thinking about that, not from a constrained standpoint, like I did, like looking at my resume and saying, who would hire me? Not that kind of question, but the kind of question of what do you really want? What is an amazing relationship? If you guys are like, if you had the kind of dream relationship that you could pinch yourself, it's so good. And same with your career and your fitness and your hobbies and your friendships. And it's like, if everything in life were amazing, start to think about what that looks like. Create a picture of that. Because once you've got a picture, you know what to do, right? Men are people of action. Men like to move. We like to go get stuff done. So create that picture, but you've got to break the code of what you think is possible. Because if you're just creating the picture inside of your constraints of, well, this is what I've had before, so maybe I can have this, or maybe I can have it 10% better. You might be able to get 10% better, but what if you went for 2 or 3 times as good? And maybe you don't hit 2 or 3 times as good, but you might hit 150% or, way better than what you've experienced ever before in your life. And man, go for it, because life is short. So the book is really to help people, walk people through that process, to help them understand what is your code, where does it come from, to kind of chip away at that, start to break it so that you can envision a success that is a whole new level of success in your life, and success in the broadest sense, and then go do it.
Right. And I want to tease a little bit about the book to get people interested. And one of the things you talk about is InnerTech.
Yeah.
Right. In the book. And just describe a little bit. I know that we probably can't go into all the detail of what your philosophy of InnerTech is, but tell us a little bit about that. And then tell us why they should grab the book to read and learn more about what InnerTech is and how that will help them.
So InnerTech is, I draw having worked at Apple for a lot of years, I use technology as an example, right? If you think about your phone, when you put a new app on your phone, and let's say that app wants to use the camera. Well, what happens? You get a little prompt on your phone that says, do you give this app permission to use the camera? So basically you've got an operating system, which is what gives you that prompt. And that operating system controls what kind of features the app can use. So that's the world of technology. Now translate that into your own life. You are the hardware. You're you're the phone. You've got amazing capabilities, right?
Yes.
And you've got an operating system that decides, can you use them or not? So let's say you've got this picture of, man, I would love to have this amazing relationship, but your operating system is like, no, you don't get permission for that because you've never had a good relationship. All of your relationships have failed. You ended in divorce. You're never going to have a good relationship. That's just not in the cards for you, right? Yeah. Your operating system, your beliefs, your history has blocked out this possibility, and you're basically shooting yourself in the foot.
Yes.
So that's the idea of InnerTech. We have that, just like your phone has all those, the operating system in your phone has all these same kind of capabilities to allow what you can do and what you can't do. You have the same thing. And so, but you have full control over your operating system. So that's something, that's your code, that's your programming. You can break through that. You can you can change it. So if you want to understand that more deeply and then have a formula for how to apply it, that's what I lay out in the book so that you can actually achieve what it is that you want.
I love that. And divorce is the perfect time to be upgrading your systems, right? And that's you're changing lots of other stuff. So this is it's time to install that app and upgrade and move forward. So that's awesome. Yeah. What's the name of the book, and where can people find it?
Yeah. So the book is called Breaking
Maybe you can
the Code.
hold it up for those that are watching, because
for anyone who's on the screen. Yeah, here we go. It's Breaking the Code, Stop Looking for Answers and Start Enjoying Life. If you're searching on Amazon, the best way to search for it is Breaking the Code Rusty. Rusty's my first name. There's other books with this name out there. So if you search for Breaking the Code Rusty, this will pop right up to the top. It's on Amazon, it's on Audible. So either of those places are the best place to get it.
Awesome. And then if anybody wants to connect with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah. So you can go to rustygaillard.com. It's my last name is Gaillard. And I'm also on LinkedIn. Rusty Gaillard is a great way to reach out to me. And I'd love to have an email. So if you want to drop me an email, you can do that. It's rusty@svdreambuilders.com. That stands for Silicon Valley Dream Builders, svdreambuilders.com.
Nice. And as always, if you found value in the show, please leave a comment, like us. If you're listening on one of the podcast platforms, leave us a review. That helps immensely to spread the word and share this with another divorced or divorcing dad. Rusty Gaillard, thank you so much for being here. This was a phenomenal conversation, and maybe we can do something again in the future.
I would love to, Jude. Thanks so much for having me. This is important. This is important work, right? It's your life. So thanks for the opportunity to talk about it.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Take care.